Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Wizard101 Death Masterclass, Chapter 2, Gear and Pet Optimization. This one's going to be a long one. There's a lot of slides that we got covered today, so I'll save a lot of my final thoughts until the end. Anyways, starting off, so what are we going to be discussing in this chapter? First, figuring out what stats are needed for your gear set, finding out your ideal role and what you want to build, pet training and how to go about finding the right pet for your playstyle, playstyle creation based on gear pieces that have been dropped by enemies or bosses, what locations to find the best gear for your wizard based on early, mid, and late game, and then how better optimizing your gear will help your leveling journey through the game and get you into late game content a lot more quicker. Okay, first is Death's built-in stats to pieces of gear. Now, this is a simple concept that there are two categories of what pieces are built into your later game gear sets. And this is mainly shown at the early stages of the game to you so you understand what stats you're going to be getting and which stats you'll have to figure out ways to get around. So, Death's two pieces, besides health, their main additional stats that they're going to get on some gear pieces are going to be damage and power pip chance. Then you also do have that same gear sometimes coming with extra def resist on it to fit the mold that death school enemies will have built-in resistance to death, their own school. And you see that on other pieces as well. So once you get into later game content, like starting like at the end of the mid game into the late game, you will find pieces that give you accuracy, universal resistance, shadow pip chance, and death pierce when you reach late game gear sets alongside health, power pip chance, and damage. Mostly raid gear and specific gear pack sets contain shadow pip, or the secondary variants of like Wallaroo gear and the Selenopolis gear have variants that are more tanky style, but also give Shadow Pip. So, what roles can Death use gear to adapt to? First, you have your normal support roles. You have universal traps to improve damage in mutating hit school for. Oh, wait. Well, yeah, you can. Well, yeah. So, these will also go in. The top one is more or less. We're going to also be going over the support secondary hair tank for gear setup as well as deck setup. Thought I'd go ahead and say that. So, support, obviously, you have that. Secondary hitter, since damage and power pips are so entwined with your school that you could be a secondary hitter behind like a storm or a fire. And then of course, you have decent health and you also get some good universal resistance on some of your gear sets, so you can be a sort of pseudo tank that can face up against the bosses and stuff and also be able to heal back if you need to. Understanding these can give you a better idea of what you want to build your gear sets around and better optimize your gear to these specific roles. So, starting off with what optimizing gear might look like. Picture this. You are at level 20, you have two hats. One is a simple hat with about 96 health and 2% death damage. The other one is the same hat, but gives you an extra power chance and 3% death resist. To optimize your gear, you would pick up that level 20 hat that gives you that extra power pip chance and the 3 extra death resistance, since it gives you more stats that will help you in certain situations. 1 power pip chance might not seem like a lot, but that extra chance may give you a little bit more. Out of every 100 fights, you're getting the power pip 1 extra time that you may not have. And then let's just say you got to level 35. And then you have this death hat that we were talking about equipped. But now you find another hat that has 135 health, 6 damage, 3 power pip chance. You would then optimize your stats by equipping that level 35 hat because you have extra health, damage, and power pip chance than what you had with the level 20 hat. You can also trade damage for extra power pip chance if it means you get your better spells out quicker. So if there is so let's say, there's a piece of gear that gives you damage but a little less power pip chance, but then there's one that gives you more power pip chance but trades you maybe 2-3% more damage. It is okay to take that extra power pip chance because it means you'll be able to get your spells out quicker. You can get your AoE, and other spells you want to use out quicker, so you don't have to worry about, wasting time, extra turns, trying to just stack other things onto your character. So we'll now go from optimization to pets. So, pet stats, big factor in helping you gain more damage and other great stats to fill out your wizard. It does take some time and patience and a ton of snacks, and even a little bit of luck chimed in. With time, you'll be able to get better. You will be able to better get more. Okay, that does not sound right. So, with time, you'll be able to get better and more optimal talents from your pet trainings rather than, getting a fail pet almost every single time. Now, do note that you will get pets that just weren't meant to go, right? They just weren't meant to have that one talent you wanted. But that is okay, especially if it is a talent that works similarly to the talent that you were looking for. And like it says here, even if you don't get all the correct stats, even if it's a stat that can help in certain situations, can be useful. Where, like in one case, maybe getting the wrong percent damage talent, let's say instead of Death Giver, you got Death Boon. It's a 3% damage difference, but you're still getting damage unless you got, because on the other hand, you could have gotten something that does nothing to your wizard at all, or benefits a different school that really doesn't help you at all unless you were doing some dual school shenanigans. But and then you can always use that pet until you get the right talent next time. So now is looking for the right pet. It is up to your personal preference. There's obviously best in slot of what pets are the best. But you can make any pet into the pet of your dreams depending on, no matter what. If you want to take that one cute pet that you really like, and you want to turn it into your death damage pet, you can do that. Just know that sometimes if you do try to really stray away from some of the more streamlined pets that have the talents you want built into their pool, you may get a whole bunch of wrong talents or even some mixed talents. You'll have a really mixed bag of talents where you might lose a ton of talents that you might have needed or wanted through hatching. So, find the pet you want, then find a base that has the talents you want. Then continue hatching with it until you have all the numbers and you have all of the pet's talents in your pool that you want. I'm not going to go over the ins and outs of like pet training. That's not what this is for. If you're looking for a pet training guide, there are plenty of them on YouTube that you can use for your perusal. But I will give you the numbers of what your numbers should be at for the most optimal for certain talents. 255 strength, 250 intelligence, 260 agility, 260 will, and 250 power. This is what you would call a max 2.0 pet. This is as high as these talents will go. A max pet is 250 across the board, but you won't be able to benefit from certain pet talents like Mighty, which will give you an extra point of damage on your damage talents. So here are two pet examples for some pet optimization. One is more damage focused. The one on the bottom, the Draconis Mortalis, Mighty Maggie, has all damage talents and Mighty to give extra damage. Whereas the top one has damage and resistance, and then has a accuracy jewel socketed on. Both are viable for anything you want to do, as there's no limit to what pets you want to create. If you wanted to have just Death Dealer, Spellproof, Spell Defy, and then 2 other defense talents like Fire Ward and Storm Ward, so you could fight off, certain enemy bosses or tough enemies, you could do that. If you wanted to, go, 4 damage, if you wanted to have 4 damage on there, trade out Spell Defy for Death Boon, you could do that. Or trade out Spell Defy for Mighty. You can do a lot of. It's really no limit to what pet you could create. But just know that just remember that the only time that it means something to have a correct pet or follow a sort of trend with a pet is when you're doing advanced content where your stats are capped off at certain damage and resistance, which includes PvP, raiding, and challenge mode. Okay, and now we'll go to sort of like the little snacks and training. This is just a little quick hit little guide. Be sure to train the pet whenever you can, because it is crucial that you get the pet to adult and hatch it again until you have the 2 things: the pet you want and all the talents. You have the pet that you want, the talents, and you have the numbers all where they should be. Then you can start going and getting then you can start focusing on training it. If it fails, hatch again, try again. Or if it's something you can use, wait until later to maybe stock up on pet snacks and stuff. And go from there. If you do need snacks, gardening is your best bet. You can also get some snacks from like rewards and stuff. But also another place that you can go for easy, quick farming if you have a group of people and you can access it is Mirror Lake. It gives you pixie sticks that give you 30 pet EXP every time you feed it to your pet. And also, a little side note, every time you turn in a mainline story quest, you gain 4 pet EXP. So early on, especially when you're starting to build the pet rather than trying to actually get the actual pet fully trained up, it is actually good of you to make sure the pet that you're trying to hatch and hatch again with is always there when you turn in your quest. Because then you'll be able to get the pet EXP from turning in those quests onto that pet so that you can get it to adult quicker, hatch it, then start training it, get it to adult, rinse, repeat until you have the pet you want. Give me a sec to get a drink here. Okay. Now, playstyle gear supplementation. If you are questing as a team or want to build a bit more tanky, consider this. You can get away with swapping boots to best suit what enemies you are fighting and get extra resistances for certain types. And you get extra resistances on boots at later levels. Since boots have the lowest damage numbers from the 3 main clothing items of hat, robe, and boots, you are able to do this. Meaning, if you have a stretch of enemies of spirit or elemental school types, you can wear boots that give you extra resistances to those schools. At higher levels, 70 plus about, you can find boots that give those resistances and also give you a solid amount of power prep chance, so you can retain your 100% power prep chance due to them giving that stat as well. Supplementing this gear can also help if you're lacking in resistances from having a damaged pet that lacks spell proof or defy. And also do be free to socket accuracy onto your pet if you need extra accuracy for later down the line. Like lore spells and, once you unlock them, shadow spells and later game spells have 5% less accuracy than your normal run-of-the-mill spells that you got at the start of the game. So now we'll go through the early game stuff. Early game gear. Early game gear is very straightforward. For its gear selection, Bazaar will always usually have what you need. Just follow these things. Just follow and take these things into consideration. Does this gear have what depth needs to be stronger, power pip, and damage? If so, buy and equip. If it doesn't, try at a later level. Athames and rings don't usually give power pip until closer to level 50. At level 50, you can farm the 2 Gurtok demons inside of Malster's dungeon in Dragonspire, the Great Spire, the last dungeon in the world, for an Athame and ring that give health, damage, power pip, with good sockets on them that you can socket on accuracy or extra power pip chance if you want to have some extra power pip chance. Mid game gear. This is what I'm running right now, for the most part. I'm not running the Hangman's Hood. I have an alternative hat where you craft it from Winter Tusk in Switzerland, but if you can't craft it, that's okay. Just stick with the Hangman's Hood, or if you've done Zigzag, the Zigzag hat. Robe. Best robe for mid game gear is always going to usually be the Hangman's robe, which is also from the Waterworks. Forbidden foot gear is from the Bazaar. The Waterworks boots have less power pip chance, and also, other things. But you can also get the Mouser boot, and then of course, obviously, Dartmoor across the board is best when she hits 100. Wand, Atavistic Wand from Big Saugio and the Solarium. Switch to a wand from Chrysalis from Moros, the Tree Root, once you hit level 100. And then decks are anything until you can get the ones that give you extra pips. Late game gear is going to find that the most late game gear in the Bazaar is not ideal, as it doesn't have the stats you want. The drop gear can take a while to obtain, but that's obviously what it's for. That's what late game is usually about, is grinding for the gear that you need. You can also use the loyalty store if you have a membership to also supplement gear, and it usually will have stats that work just as well. All late game gear usually shares similar stats, just carries different spell cards with them. I don't have any examples for that, but you get the picture. So optimizes to be made while you're going through the game. Questing, that's supposed to be questing and progressing through the game, can slow down when you're unprepared with the right gear, so here's some tips for you. Taking time to work on crafting, gardening, and pet training in between questing sessions as a cooldown activity can help you get the gear that can help with stats in between certain levels that might not have gear you can buy normally. Or pets and stuff like that. Don't be afraid to spend loyalty tokens. I know there are some pretty interesting, there's some stuff in there that, you could buy that, gives, short-term stuff. You can get like gold skeleton keys, some potions for like double guarding and stuff like that. But you can also get packs. And pack gear is actually really good. Some packs give some really good gear that you can take into consideration on equipping. But don't be afraid to spend them. Unless you are totally purist and you don't want to actually rely on that until late game, level 170, when you want to get gear for other characters, that's fine. I respect that opinion on that. But don't be afraid to spend loyalty tokens if you feel that you could probably find some gear from the loyalty store that you could supplement into your setup. And then identifying when you should upgrade your gear. I would say this could be pinpointed by when it feels like you are slowing down on enemy killing. i.e., your gear damage starts feeling like that is lacking. Like if you've used the level 20 hat and you're in Dragonspire and you're finally starting to, let's say you didn't really bother optimizing your gear and you're starting to see that the enemy's health is starting to get a little bit higher than what you're usually able to dish out when not properly set up. Then I would say, hey, it's time to go and get your gear. But it can also be pinpointed if you are hitting certain level cap or specific levels like 50 and 60. Level 50, hey, you got some Athame and ring optimizations you can make. Or at level 60, you have 2 dungeons you can farm for really good gear. Those are pinpointed and obvious directions where, hey, I should go farm for this gear set or gear piece. So, here are the closing thoughts. So, firstly, gear is one of the most important parts to how questing goes in your time in the game. And if you don't stay on top of keeping your gear optimized, you can fall behind. But don't be very discouraged because it may take a little bit of farming time or needing to get some gold for early game gear pieces. So, like, if you see a hat that you really want to buy in the bazaar, but you just don't have the gold for it, that's okay. Take some time, go find some bosses that you can, beat up for some easy gear drops, and then come back, sell it, and then buy the hat that you want. And I was covering this during our pet section. Some pet talents that give school-specific resist, like Stormfire, can help you if you struggle with resistance, or even adding a Maycast heal to give you the occasional sustain can be useful. Do not early, mid, and even early into the late game, do not be afraid to experiment with your gear and pets to find what works best for you. Yes, you can follow some concrete guide of what best in slot gear you should go for and what best in slot pet you should go for, and just work to strive for that. Now, on paper, for somebody who's playing a lot more focused on getting straight to the end game and wanting to get straight into raids and stuff, yes, taking that route might be the best. But for the casual player that does this as a hobby, doesn't really do it as, just to, they do it just to have fun. Don't be afraid to experiment with your pet or even with your gear. If you are fine with, let's say you have a piece of gear that, is a lot more bulkier, but also gives you, let's say it's, I think one of the best ideas of this is if a hat gives universal resist. There's a hat in, I think, Azteca that gives universal resist. It also gives a little bit of universal accuracy. The damage number is not the highest, but it's still a piece of gear that you could use due to the fact that it has universal resistance, and that goes for every single school defensively. But like I said, don't be afraid to experiment with the gear and pets. Because we're talking about improving your individual play, not an end-all be-all was the best to use guide. So find what works for your individual type of playstyle. Don't just follow, and I have another thing here. Maxing out damage is usually recommended, but at the end of the day, it is your decision on how you want to gear up your wizard. Take time to analyze your gear stats, and then build your setup based on what is most comfortable to you. If you're fine with, being a little bit more attrition-based, making sure that your enemies are, maybe you rather be a little bit more cutthroat and you do want to max out damage, that's good. That's fine. Go for it. Because obviously the one thing about Wizard101 is you have no real punishment for limit testing what you can do with your gear. Because you can always, at some point, if you reach a fight where a certain gear setup is not working properly, you can take a look at what you have and what you can maybe change to get a better result. And I don't think there's anything else. Right. Okay, so, yeah, this was a long one. This was a long slide. There was a lot to cover. But hopefully this did help a little bit, give you a better understanding of what gear, what to look for in your gear, and also a little bit into pets. I will be sort of giving you a sort of step plan of, when we get later down the line, I have like a miscellaneous tips. We will be covering a thing that I think may help people that are a lot more casual to the game, sort of, have an idea of what they can do in their sessions. And we'll go over that when we get to it, but next chapter will be on spell deck and how to build it and stuff. So with that being said, thank you so much for coming to this episode or chapter of the Death Masterclass. Stay tuned for chapter 3 where we'll be covering the spell deck section. So I thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.